This house was mine for 53 years. Every splinter, every coat of paint, every scratch on the hardwood floor was a memory built with my late wife, Eleanor. Now, it felt like a cage designed by my daughter Clara. She started small. At first, it was concern. Dad, are you sure you locked the back door? Then it became suspicion. Dad, where did you put the insurance documents? Did you forget you handed them to me last week? The house became the central gravity of the fight. Clara lived across town in a nice modern condo, but she visited 3 times a week, always during the day, always when I was doing something simple, like balancing the checkbook or watering the porch hydrangeas. She would hover, not helping, just judging. I knew why she was here. She wasn't just checking on me. She was auditing me. She wanted control. She wanted the power of attorney. And eventually, she wanted the house. I wasn't blind. I was 78, not senile. The worst incident happened over a simple jar of pickles. I had always insisted on buying my own groceries. It was the only trip I still looked forward to. The smell of the bakery, the familiar aisles, the freedom of choice. One Tuesday, I brought home a specific jar of sweet gherkins. I loved those. Eleanor hated them, so I hadn't had them since she passed. A little rebellion. When Clara came over that evening, she saw the jar on the counter, unopened. Dad, she sighed, her voice dripping with that professional patience she reserved only for me now. Why did you buy these? We have 3 jars already in the pantry. Remember the dill ones I got for you last Thursday? I told her I preferred the sweet gherkins. She didn't argue the taste, she argued the capacity. No, Dad, you don't remember buying them. You went through the list and just duplicated the order. That's fine. It happens. But we need to keep a better track of things, don't we? It wasn't about the pickles. It was the careful positioning of my mistake. She wasn't seeing me as a man who chose his own snack. She saw me as an inefficient elder, wasting money, demonstrating poor memory. I stared at the jar. I remembered buying it perfectly. I remembered the cashier, the price, the exact moment I thought, Eleanor won't complain about these anymore. I felt the heat rise in my collar. I bought them, Clara, I said, my voice low and steady. I bought them because I wanted them. Don't treat me like a child playing shop. She chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that was meant to deflate me. Dad, please, let's not make a fuss. It's just pickles. I'll take them back tomorrow. She took the jar. She tucked it under her arm like evidence and carried it out to her car. That night, the silence in the house was heavy. The sense of isolation felt physical. It wasn't just that she had taken the pickles. It was the way she had erased my decision. She had dictated my reality. This was no longer about care. This was about takeover. I realized then that her concern was the mechanism of my displacement. Every small argument, every correction was a narrative she was building. Arthur is confused. Arthur cannot manage his life. If I couldn't even defend my choice of gherkins, how could I defend my savings, my house, or my dignity? I knew I needed proof. My word against hers was no contest when she had the authority of the caring daughter. I needed her words, recorded in the moment, revealing the calculation behind the compassion. The next morning, I drove carefully to the electronics store in the neighboring town, a place I knew Clara would never frequent. I felt a strange sense of mission, almost like I was returning to my youth, back when I had to sneak things around my own parents. Now I was sneaking things around my child. I bought a small, high-quality voice recorder. It looked like a flash drive, simple, discreet. The salesperson, a young man with bright blue hair, showed me how to activate the continuous loop setting. I told him it was for recording nature sounds when I hiked. He nodded politely, clearly not believing a word, but keeping his customer service smile intact. I spent the afternoon practicing. I hid it inside a half-empty tissue box on my desk. I put it under a stack of magazines in the living room. I even taped it temporarily under the rim of the kitchen counter. I needed the placement to be perfect for when she next came. I needed clear audio of her true voice. I felt like an operative in my own living room. The absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh, but the underlying fear kept me rigid. I was fighting for the last scraps of my autonomy. Clara arrived on Wednesday for her routine check-in. She brought take-out Chinese food, which always meant she wanted something. Fried rice was the lubricant for difficult conversations. I had the recorder running, nestled deep inside the leather cup holder where I kept my reading glasses on the end table. We ate in the dining room. The conversation was pleasant at first. Small talk about her job, my slow recovery from the flu last month. Then she dabbed her lips with a napkin and leaned forward, her tone shifting to the serious, confiding register. "Dad," she began. The word stretched out into 4 syllables of heavy concern. "I spoke to Dr. Harrison's office today." My stomach clenched. Dr. Harrison was my primary care physician. "Oh, everything all right?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, while my hand secretly hovered near the cup holder, checking if the indicator light was still flashing its invisible signal. "Yes, mostly. But remember how we talked about your memory sometimes giving you trouble? Just little blips, nothing serious," she emphasized, using the word blipsinchis as if discussing a minor TV static issue, not my brain function. "I haven't had trouble, Clara. You just forget that I remember things." "See, that's exactly what I mean," she jumped in, quickly. "That defensive reaction. It's a classic symptom. Look, I scheduled an appointment for you next Monday. It's a standard cognitive assessment. Just a quick questionnaire. Nothing invasive." "A cognitive assessment? Why, Clara?" I frowned, feigning confusion, though I knew exactly why. She was formalizing her narrative. "Because, Dad, we need to be responsible. If anything were to happen, say you had a fall or needed a sudden move, the paperwork for the house and your accounts needs to be solid. The bank requires proof of capacity for a smooth transfer of power. Eventually, we need to be proactive. We need Dr. Harrison to confirm everything is fine for the records." She made it sound purely administrative, a necessary evil for future convenience. But the subtext screamed, "I need the doctor to confirm you're losing it, so I can seize control now." "I'm perfectly capable of handling my own affairs," I insisted, my voice firmer than I felt. Clara sighed, pushing her plate away. She was moving into the confrontation phase. "Dad, you left the stove on 3 weeks ago. You left the water running in the sink 2 weeks ago. Remember when you swore you paid the phone bill, but the account was delinquent? You blamed the phone company. These are not perfectly capable moments. You are 78. It happens. Those were accidents. They were lapses, Arthur, and I need to protect you from yourself." That was the line, the justification for her eventual theft. She was protecting me. She went on, detailing her plan. "On Monday, when we go, I will speak to the doctor briefly first. I will explain the pattern of lapses. This isn't lying, Dad. It's providing context. The doctor needs to know what to look for during the assessment. If your memory scores are a little low, we can start you on supplements or a low-dose medication, and then we can transition the fiduciary responsibilities to me. It will make things easier for everyone, especially you." Her voice was sweet, persuasive, and utterly chilling. She was laying out the precise blueprint for how she intended to sabotage my credibility. Right before the medical authority examined me, she was admitting the setup. She was admitting she would brief the doctor with lies of omission and exaggeration, priming the medical professional to doubt my every answer. "You understand, Dad. We need to be on the same team here. When the doctor asks about your memory, you tell him the truth. That sometimes, yes, you forget little things. Don't fight him. Don't try to sound too clever. Just be honest about the occasional confusion for my peace of mind. She was instructing me to perform incompetence. She needed me to play the part of the frail, forgetting elder to validate her control. I looked at her across the table. Her eyes were bright, focused on the outcome. There was no love there, only ambition and calculation. Yes, Clara, I managed, keeping my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake happening inside me. I understand. For your peace of mind, she smiled. A brilliant, triumphant smile. Good. Thank you, Dad. You're making the right choice. After she left, carrying the empty containers and assuring me she would pick me up at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday, I didn't move for a long time. I was numb. This was deeper than betrayal. This was cold, calculated excision. She wasn't waiting for me to fail. She was actively manufacturing the evidence of my failure. I reached for the leather cup holder and retrieved the small recorder. My hands were shaking as I connected it to the computer. I put on my old headphones, the heavy cushioned ones, and pressed play. First, the faint sounds of chewing. Then, her voice. I will explain the pattern of lapses. This isn't lying, Dad. It's providing context. The doctor needs to know what to look for. The audio was clear, crisp, every word of her manipulation preserved. The evidence of my daughter's treachery recorded for posterity. I listened to the entire 20 minutes twice. Each listening solidified the terrible reality, but also crystallized my resolve. I was not going to be led like a lamb to slaughter. I would not allow her carefully constructed lie to become my life sentence. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the dimly lit screen of the recorder. The doctor was supposed to assess my mental state on Monday, but Clara had forgotten one crucial variable. I had already assessed hers. The doctor would hear Clara's narrative first. That was unavoidable. But that night, Monday night, when the visiting nurse came to check my vitals, a necessary precaution since my flu, I would have a counter-narrative ready. I would show the nurse the small flash drive, the evidence of the careful, deliberate deceit used by my own blood. I needed to know if the nurse, a mandated reporter, would believe the sound of Clara's ambition over the doctor's assessment based on a pre-loaded lie. I wiped the condensation from the recorder casing. The wait until Monday felt agonizingly long, but I had the evidence. I had the truth. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid. I felt cold, determined. The game had begun, and my opponent had just provided me with the winning hand. I just needed to survive the doctor's appointment. I began making my final preparations for Monday, reviewing the will, contacting the lawyer, and deciding exactly what I would say when I played the audio recording for the nurse, detailing the cruelty that had been inflicted upon me, just so my daughter could secure a house she hadn't earned. The moment of truth was almost here. It was the quiet that followed the lie that hurt the most. Not the shouting, not the accusation, but the casual manner in which Sarah dismissed my sanity, like flicking ash from a cigarette. She left my study, calling out a cheerful, "I'll handle the bank transfer, Dad. Don't worry your head about it." Don't worry my head. My head was clearer than it had been in years. Clear and ice cold. I sat in the dark for a long time. The mahogany desk felt heavy under my hands. It was the same desk I had built 50 years ago. The house was mine. The life was mine. And she was trying to steal the key. I had always known greed existed. I just never expected it to wear my daughter's face. I thought about fighting her immediately, yelling, demanding the house papers back. But what good would that do? She would just point to my rage and say, "See, he's volatile. He's confused." Her weapon was my supposed fragility. My counter-weapon had to be silence, proof. She wanted to believe I was old and useless. I decided to give her exactly what she wanted. I was not ready to be discarded. I remembered something then, something buried deep in the spare bedroom closet. An old digital voice recorder. I used it decades ago for board meetings, before every phone became a recording device. It was hidden in a dusty box of cables, under an old college yearbook. It took me 20 minutes to find the right AA batteries in the junk drawer. My hands didn't shake, though my stomach was tied in a knot. I inserted the batteries. The small screen flickered to life. 100. Yakis? Ready. I pressed the record button, then the play button. My own voice, deep and slightly raspy, filled the silent room. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. The sound was clear. Perfect. It felt strange, this little black device. Like holding a secret spy gadget. It was protection. It was my only witness. I started practicing. Where to hide it? I couldn't carry it in my pocket. She patted me down sometimes, joking about looking for my wallet. A horrible, intimate joke that meant she was checking for documents. I found the perfect spot. I had an old, heavy wooden clock on the mantelpiece in the living room. It was broken. The hands hadn't moved in years, but it was decorative. The back panel was loose. I tucked the recorder inside the hollow base, angled perfectly. It was silent, unseen. That night, she came over for dinner. Sunday night tradition. Now it felt like an interrogation. She was overly kind, too sweet. She brought the good wine, the kind she usually reserved for guests who mattered. "Dad, you look tired," she said, leaning over to kiss my forehead. I saw her eyes flick past me, assessing the room, calculating her next move. I played the role she assigned me. I fumbled the salt shaker. I asked the same question twice about her husband's job. She exchanged a look with her husband Mark across the table, a knowing, wary glance. "He's failing fast. We need to move quickly." It was humiliating, pretending to be less than I was, but every clumsy movement was a vote for my future plan. Later, Mark went outside to take a phone call, something about the stock market. Sarah stayed in the living room with me, sipping her coffee. This was the moment I was waiting for. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through pictures. "Oh, Dad, remember that trip to the coast last summer? You look so happy here." Then the true conversation started. "I spoke to the real estate agent again today, Dad," she began, her voice soft, sympathetic. "The market is hot right now. We really should think about listing the house soon, for your own safety." "Safety?" I mumbled, looking confusedly at my coffee cup. She sighed, a dramatic, audible release of exasperation, the kind meant to convey immense burden. "Yes, safety. The upkeep is too much for you, Dad. You almost fell on the stairs last week, remember? It's too big. And honestly, the money from the sale would be so much better in a secure trust fund, one that Mark and I can manage for you." I kept my eyes vague, unfocused. I did not move toward the clock. I didn't need to. The recorder had been running since she walked into the room. "I need to be in control of your finances, Dad, just until things settle down. The doctor will agree with me next week, I'm sure of it. He'll see you need supervision." The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just about the house. It was about locking me out of my own life, using a doctor's professional opinion to rubber stamp her theft. "I wish you would just cooperate," she whispered, leaning closer, her voice now a sharp, low hiss of frustration. "It's not hard. Just sign the transfer papers. It's what Mom would have wanted. Peace of mind." She used my dead wife's name. That was the lowest blow. I didn't react. I just nodded slowly, looking out the window. "Whatever you think is best, dear," I said, my voice thin and weak. She smiled, a triumphant, satisfied smile. "Good man, Dad. Now, let's talk about changing the locks while we wait for the power of attorney." When they finally left, the house was silent again. The air felt heavy with the smell of expensive wine and deceit. I waited 10 full minutes. Then I walked slowly to the mantelpiece. I carefully removed the broken clock face and retrieved the recorder. I retreated to my study, locked the door, and put on the headphones I kept for listening to classical music. My hands were perfectly steady now. The tremor was gone. I pressed the rewind button, then play. Sarah's voice filled the headphones, cheerful, sympathetic, and then cold and demanding. The money from the sale would be so much better in a secure trust fund, one that Mark and I can manage for you. The doctor will agree with me next week. I'm sure of it. He'll see you need supervision. I listened to the entire exchange twice. Every manipulative phrase, every calculated sigh. It was proof, undeniable proof, of financial elder abuse and intentional deceit. The clinical sound of her greed, captured digitally, was far more chilling than the anger I had felt during the confrontation. I saved the file. I labeled it Sarah Sunday Dinner. My first instinct had been to destroy it, to destroy her, to throw the recording in her face and watch her panic. But I remembered the title of her strategy, Supervision. She was taking me to the doctor next week to confirm I was incompetent. I realized I couldn't fight her publicly without the recording, and I couldn't just show the recording to her. I needed an audience, an impartial witness, the doctor's office. That was the stage she chose. That would be the stage for the unveiling. The memory test was in 3 days. Sarah would use that environment to finalize her narrative of my mental decline. But I would be waiting. I would let her say her piece, let her tell the doctor every fabricated story about my failing mind. And then, when she was finished, when she felt she had completely sealed my fate, I would deliver the truth, silently, effectively. I needed to decide who exactly would hear this recording first. The doctor, certainly, but someone else needed to know. Someone who would see the cruelty, not just the clinical facts. The nurse, the intake nurse, the one who saw everything. I put the small recorder back in its protective cloth bag and placed it in the deepest drawer of my dresser under a pile of woolen sweaters. I was no longer just an old man waiting to be managed. I was a man with evidence, and I was waiting for the perfect time to strike. 3 days felt like an eternity. I had to continue playing the weak, confused father. I had to let her believe she was winning. I had to keep the secret close, closer than my own skin. I closed the drawer. The stage was set. The trap was ready. I just had to survive until the appointment. The car ride home was a torture of silence. Not peaceful silence, but the heavy, suffocating silence of absolute victory and absolute defeat. She hummed a little tune beside me, a low, casual sound of contentment. She had done it. She had painted the picture she wanted, right in the doctor's office. I didn't look at her face. I looked straight ahead at the road passing by, but my attention was focused on the small, heavy weight in my coat pocket, the recording device. It felt hot against my chest, a small, humming truth teller. It held every word, every lie. She had told the doctor I was erratic. She said I confused her with my deceased sister. She claimed I spoke constantly about selling the house to move back to a city I hadn't lived in since 1974. All of it was invention, pure, calculated theater. She walked into the house ahead of me, already talking into her phone, loudly. "It's done, honey." He didn't suspect a thing. The doctor was very clear, easily suggestible and exhibiting signs of mild cognitive decline. "We can push through the durable power of attorney paperwork next week." Power of attorney. That was the prize. That was the lever she needed to sell the house, to access the trust, and to move me wherever she decided was cheapest and easiest for her. I walked to the kitchen, feeling a weariness that went deeper than exhaustion. It was a weariness of the soul. I reached for my favorite mug, the heavy blue ceramic one I'd used every morning for 30 years. It wasn't there. In its place was a white plastic travel cup with a secure, spill-proof lid. "Oh, that?" she asked, hanging up the phone and turning to me with a saccharine smile. "I put that old mug away, Dad. It's heavy, and frankly, I worry you'll drop it. This one is much safer, less risk, less risk, less dignity." I stood there, holding the lightweight plastic cup, and felt the first true wave of searing cold rage. She was treating me like an infant who could not be trusted with gravity or ceramic. I didn't fight her on the mug. I didn't say a word. I just nodded slowly. Let her think she was winning the small battles. Let her think I was compliant and suggestible, just as she had told the doctor. That night, sleep was impossible. The shame was too loud in my ears. The sound of the doctor's pen scratching notes after her lies felt like nails on a chalkboard in my memory. I locked my bedroom door quietly. I took out the small device and the tiny headphones. I needed to hear it again. I needed to confirm the exact weapon I had against her. I pressed play. The sounds were muffled at first, just the low background noise of the clinic, then the doctor's steady professional voice. "And what specific behaviors concern you most, ma'am?" Then my daughter's voice, perfect and composed, tinged with just the right amount of practiced sorrow. "It's the memory, doctor. It's deteriorating fast. Just this morning, he insisted he had an appointment with a realtor, claiming he was liquidating the assets. When I corrected him, he became agitated and accused me of theft. A complete fabrication. I had said nothing of the sort. I had simply asked where the house keys were." I heard the doctor inhale. "And the confusion regarding family members?" "Yes. Last week he kept calling me Linda. That was his sister. She passed away 12 years ago. He was adamant. It breaks my heart to see him like this." I closed my eyes tightly. She had weaponized my grief. She had used the dead against me. The recording continued, culminating in the final deadly blow. "In summary, doctor, I worry deeply for his financial safety. He's too fragile, too easily coerced. He really shouldn't be managing anything alone anymore." The recording ended. The silence in the headphones was deafening. I sat there in the darkness, the device heavy in my hand. I was not easily coerced. I was not fragile. I was furious, and I was holding the key to her absolute destruction. The lawyer could wait. If I went straight to a lawyer now, she would say I was paranoid. She would cite the doctor's report. I needed an independent witness, a clean pair of eyes and ears. I needed someone who saw the real me every day, not the caricature she had painted. I thought of Maria, the night nurse. Maria was quiet, efficient, and never judgmental. She came into the house every night at 9 and stayed until 7 the next morning. She handled my medication, prepared my breakfast tray, and often sat with me for a few minutes if I was restless. She was neutral, she was professional, and she was the first person I would trust with the truth. I waited until precisely 11 o'clock. That was her routine check-in time. I heard the soft click of the doorknob as she came in to check the security of the kitchen windows. A few moments later, there was a quiet, respectful tap on my bedroom door. "Mr. Peterson, just checking in. Is everything settled for the night?" Maria's voice was low and calm. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. This was it, the point of no return. I opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked tired, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her uniform crisp. "Maria," I whispered, keeping my voice low so it would not carry through the floorboards. "Can I ask you to step into the small sitting room? Just for a minute. I need to show you something critical." Her brow furrowed slightly with concern. She immediately thought I was unwell. Of course, Mr. Peterson. Are you in pain? No, I said, shaking my head firmly. I am perfectly well, but I have proof that the world thinks I am not, and I need someone outside the family to believe me. I walked her swiftly into the unused sitting room at the back of the house, away from the kitchen and the main hall. I closed the door almost completely, leaving a sliver of light from the hallway illuminating the floor. I did not pause for polite conversation. I held out the small recorder. Maria, this is what happened today at the doctor's office. Before any legal action starts, I need you to know the depth of the betrayal. She is trying to have me declared incompetent to steal the house. I recorded her lies. Maria's face went pale. She looked down at the tiny device in my hand, then back up at my resolute gaze. Mr. Peterson, she began, obviously overwhelmed by the implication. Please, I interrupted softly. Just listen. I pressed the playback button again. I held the device between us, turning up the volume just enough for her to hear the clear, cold cadence of my daughter's fabricated stories. We stood there in silence, listening to the destruction of my reputation, my daughter's calm voice accusing me of calling her Linda and threatening the house sale. When the recording reached the segment where she claimed I was easily coerced and should be stripped of my financial control, Maria covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the corner of the room, listening to the impossible. The truth was now tangible, captured in the dark. The final click of the device signaled the end. The room felt immense and cold. Maria slowly lowered her hand. She did not look at me with pity or confusion. She looked at me with immediate burning conviction. Mr. Peterson, she said, her voice a fierce, low whisper. We need to talk to my supervisor. Immediately. This is not just a disagreement. This is highly illegal. And she used her family position to manipulate a medical opinion. I nodded once, a great relief washing over me. I was believed. I had found my first ally. The game was no longer being played entirely in the dark. I had given the evidence to a professional, a mandated reporter. My daughter thought she had won the day in the clinic. She did not know that her words were already out, working against her, spreading the truth under the silent watch of the night. I had just played the recording for the nurse, and the quiet battle for my dignity was about to turn into a swift, official war. The leather chair in the waiting room was too soft, too plush. It felt like a trap designed to lull the vulnerable into compliance. Sarah was checking her phone, humming a tune I hadn't heard since she was in college. She looked relaxed, victorious, even before the battle began. Remember, Dad, she said without looking up, just tell Dr. Peterson the truth about the stove, about the keys. I nodded slowly, my gaze fixed on the worn carpet. The small cold microphone I had taped beneath my undershirt pressed against my ribs. It was warm now, running continuously, recording every breath, every calculated performance. I was not afraid of the doctor. I was only afraid of failing to prove what she had become. When we were called back, Sarah took the lead instantly. She positioned herself between me and the examining table, acting as my shield and my interpreter. Dr. Peterson was kind, too kind. He had soft eyes and a clipboard that seemed heavier than necessary. Mr. Hayes, he started, Sarah tells me you've been having some trouble with daily tasks. Before I could form a proper sentence, Sarah leaned forward, her voice dripping with artificial worry. It's gotten worse, doctor. Just yesterday, he insisted we had to drive to the old grocery store, the one that closed down 5 years ago. He was adamant. And the confusion, the terrible confusion. She paused, making sure the emotion landed. He asked me, straight face, if I had spoken to my mother recently. My mother doctor, who passed away 10 years ago. He knows she passed away. He spoke at her funeral. But he looked at me and said, "Tell Eleanor hello for me." It breaks my heart. She sniffled lightly, reaching for a tissue. This was the moment. The sharp, fabricated lie, designed to erase my current reality and replace it with her desired narrative of my decline. I watched her performance, my chest tight. I did not correct her about Eleanor. I did not defend the memory of the grocery store. I remained silent, the good, confused old man they wanted me to be. The doctor turned to me. "Mr. Hayes, can you tell me the date? Today?" I told him the date, the year, and the name of the president. Quietly, clearly. "Excellent. Now, Sarah mentioned the grocery store incident. Is that accurate? That you tried to drive to the closed store?" I lifted my eyes to meet the doctor's. "I asked Sarah if we needed to stop by where the store used to be," I corrected, using the precise phrasing I knew I had used, which the device was currently confirming. "I wanted to check on the construction site across the street. I heard the foundation was pouring today." Sarah's eyes flickered. Just a quick spasm of panic, instantly covered by a forced, worried laugh. "See, doctor? That's the thing. He tries to make sense of it after the fact. He confabulates." I let her use the long clinical word. Confabulation. Another strike against my competency. The doctor continued with his assessment. He tested my recall, my spatial awareness, and my logic. I answered every question truthfully, keeping my mind razor sharp, concentrating on the words the doctor was saying, not the insidious commentary Sarah kept layering over my answers. When the test concluded, Dr. Peterson tapped his pen thoughtfully. "Mr. Hayes, based on the preliminary assessment, your cognitive function seems within a normal range for your age. However," he looked at Sarah, acknowledging her palpable anxiety. "Given Sarah's documented observations and the history of recent changes, I recommend a short observational stay, a structured environment where staff can assess daily function without the influence of family dynamics. Just 48 hours." Sarah instantly beamed. She got what she wanted. Temporary incapacitation. She would have the paperwork needed to start the legal process before I was even home. "That sounds wonderful, doctor. Thank you. A little rest will do him good." I nodded again, accepting the sentence calmly. I knew this was coming. It was the only way to get her to drop her guard entirely. She needed to feel the absolute certainty of victory. Within 2 hours, I was settled into the transitional assessment unit. It was clean, quiet, and profoundly lonely. Sarah stayed long enough to give the intake nurse a detailed list of my supposed needs, reminders for medication, insistence that I watch only specific slow-paced programs, and a caution about my tendency to wander in the evenings. "He thinks he's still in the war sometimes," she whispered dramatically to the nurse, making sure I heard. "Just be patient with him." She kissed my forehead, a dry, cool kiss, and promised she would be back the day after tomorrow, ready to bring me home, presumably a home she would soon control. When the door closed behind her, the silence was overwhelming. I finally reached beneath my shirt, carefully disconnecting the small recorder and placing it inside the soft slipper I had brought. I sat there, staring at the bland institutional watercolor on the wall, waiting for the shift change, waiting for the darkness to settle. The evening nurse arrived promptly at 7. Her name tag read Evelyn. Evelyn was not like the intake staff. She was older, with strong hands, and eyes that had seen far too much. She moved with quiet competence, checking my vitals, adjusting the blanket without asking. "Are you comfortable, Mr. Hayes?" she asked, her voice low and non-judgmental. "I am, Evelyn. Thank you." She sat down on the edge of the bed opposite me, finishing charting my pulse. "Your daughter is very concerned about you," Evelyn observed neutrally. I met her steady gaze. My daughter has concerns. Yes, I have concerns too. She didn't push. She simply waited. That silence, the space she gave me, was the first true respect I had felt all day. Evelyn, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I need you to listen to something. I reached for the slipper, extracting the small black device. It looked innocuous, like an old MP3 player. Her professional face did not change. What is that, Mr. Hayes? It's the truth, Evelyn. Or rather, the proof that everything you heard today was a lie. I tapped the button. The room remained silent for a beat, and then Sarah's voice, recorded just this afternoon, filled the small space. It was the conversation we had in the car, right after the grocery store correction in front of the doctor, but before we arrived at the clinic. You think you're so smart, don't you, old man? Talking about the construction site. It doesn't matter. The doctor saw how shaky you were. I just needed the observation period. Once I have the initial diagnosis, the lawyers can draw up the papers. You won't remember the password to the account by the end of the week anyway. The recording paused for a necessary intake of breath, and then her cruelest line, the one that broke my heart even while I was recording it. And telling the doctor about Mom. Genius. Absolutely genius. He ate it up. Who cares if she died 10 years ago? You'll forget that next week too. Evelyn did not move. Her face remained a mask of professional calm, but her grip tightened visibly on the charting pen until her knuckles were white. I stopped the playback. The air in the room felt thick with the weight of her deceit. That, I told the night nurse, leaning forward slightly, is why I was brought here. Not because I forget the past, but because I remember everything she wants me to forget. Evelyn slowly put the pen down on the bedside table. She looked directly at the recording device and then back at me. Her compassion was now mixed with a sudden, cold fury on my behalf. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice firm and low, do you have any other copies of this recording? 3 of them, I confirmed. All secure. She stood up. The silence in the room was electric. This changes things entirely, she stated. I am mandated to report any suspicion of elder abuse or manipulation, especially within a medical context. She took 2 steps towards the door, then paused. I need to contact the facility director immediately, and then the doctor who admitted you. This must be documented tonight. I felt a wave of exhausted relief wash over me. The trap Sarah had set for me had become the cage she built for herself. Thank you, Evelyn, I whispered. Just document the truth. I will, she promised. And Mr. Hayes, you are not confused. You are a victim. And now, you are safe. She opened the door, ready to set the legal machine in motion. I knew that by the time Sarah came back to collect her confused father, she would be walking into a very different conversation. The power had shifted, silently, definitively, in the quiet darkness of the transitional unit. I lay back on the pillows, the first restful sleep I had anticipated in months finally seeming possible. But the fight for control of my life, the real battle for justice, was only just beginning. I still had the passwords, the will, and a lifetime of carefully guarded assets. And now I had proof. The silence in that small office was crushing. It was the loudest sound I had heard in years. The social worker, Mrs. Peterson, slowly put her pen down. She didn't look at me, but she didn't look at Clara's file either. She stared at the small, cheap recorder on the desk between us. The recording was undeniable. It wasn't just my shaky memory she had heard. It was Clara's voice, sharp and cold, dictating lies. It was her plan, laid out clearly. Tell the doctor you are confused about the forms, Dad. It's for your own good. Say you can't remember where you signed the deed. Mrs. Peterson finally looked at me. Her expression was grave, but there was a flicker of something else. Respect. Mr. Davies, she said softly, I need to ensure your safety immediately. We will contact the necessary channels now. I just nodded. I felt a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders. The fight wasn't over, but the evidence was secured. Within the hour, the atmosphere at the care facility changed completely. Clara was informed that her visitation and access rights were suspended until a formal investigation was completed. She stormed in, demanding to see me. She was hysterical. Daddy, what are you doing? They are trying to separate us. Don't let them do this. The facility director, a stern woman named Miss Hayes, blocked her path at the entrance. Clara tried to pull the old trick. The tears, the helpless daughter routine. He is confused, Miss Hayes. He doesn't understand what he signed. He can't even remember his breakfast. Miss Hayes looked past Clara, straight at me, standing calmly inside the day room. Mr. Davies appears perfectly lucid today, Miss Thompson, and we have heard the recording of your last conversation. There will be no further discussions about his memory today. We are taking protective custody measures. Clara gasped. Her face went pale and blotchy. The panic was real. Now, because she realized she hadn't just been caught in a lie, she had been recorded admitting the intent of the fraud. She looked at me with pure venom. The mask was entirely gone. You set me up, she hissed across the lobby. You pathetic old man. You won't get away with this. I didn't shout back. I didn't engage in the fight she craved. I just stood there, straight as I could manage, and gave her a small controlled shake of the head. You set yourself up, Clara, I said, my voice steady for the first time in months. You forgot that the paperwork I signed was real, and you forgot I might be quiet. But I am not deaf. That night, I slept soundly. I knew the consequences would be painful, but they would be hers, not mine. The next morning, the real work began. I met with my original lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who had helped me with the power of attorney paperwork years ago. He listened to the recording twice, shaking his head with increasing disbelief. This is coercion, Robert. We can absolutely reverse the attempted transfer of the house and initiate the financial controls necessary to ensure she never touches your accounts again. That was my justice. Not ruin, but insulation. Complete and irreversible insulation. We spent the week rewriting everything. The power of attorney, which Clara had tried so desperately to seize, was immediately transferred to Mr. Henderson, with strict instructions that he could only act upon my direct written request. I established a new trust, a final, definitive will. Clara's name was still present because she was my daughter, and I could not entirely remove the small portion of my heart that still grieved for the daughter she once was. But every significant asset, the house, the savings, the investments intended for my great-grandchildren, was placed outside of her immediate reach. She would receive a small annual stipend, provided she demonstrated absolutely no legal or physical attempts to interfere with my life or health. It was a cold, precise form of forgiveness, enough to keep her out of poverty, but never enough to give her control. She tried to fight it. She hired a lawyer. The lawyer wrote scathing letters, claiming elder abuse against her, the daughter, for isolating her from her father. Mr. Henderson simply sent them the transcript of the recording. The fighting stopped almost instantly. No lawyer wanted to take on a case where the client's attempt at fraud was recorded in her own voice. I knew that removing her financial control was crucial, but the house remained the key. It was the source of all the greed. It was the reason she had tried to ruin my memory. I needed to sever that anchor completely. I called Mr. Henderson back. I want to sell the house, Jeremy. He paused. Robert, you don't have to do that. The title is secured in your name again. I know, I said, but I cannot live there anymore. Not with those memories. And as long as it exists, fixed in that one place, It is a target. It is her target. The moment I made that decision, I felt truly free. The house was just wood and nails, but it had carried the weight of my life and the burden of Clara's resentment. A few days later, a realtor came to the facility. We went through the photos, the pricing, the staging. It felt clinical, almost detached. That house, where I had raised my children, where my wife passed away, was now just a product on a shelf. It was sad, but the sadness was clean. It wasn't layered with shame or fear. We listed the house immediately, priced to sell quickly. The money would be placed in the trust, making it safer, more abstract, harder for Clara to seize. The physical severance was necessary. I needed to move away, not just out of the house, but out of the state. I found a quiet assisted living community near the coast, hundreds of miles away. It was sunny, the nurses seemed kind, and the air smelled like salt and freedom. I told Mr. Henderson to handle the transfer of funds and documentation. Clara called the facility every day for a week. The staff, now well informed and fiercely protective, told her I was unavailable. Then she drove up and waited outside. She sat in her car across the street, just watching the building, the way she used to watch me when she was a child waiting for the school bus. I looked out the window once. She looked defeated, small. But I did not feel pity. I felt the cold realization that her defeat was necessary for my survival. I had given her every chance to be the daughter I needed. She chose to be the vulture instead. I finalized the arrangements for the move. I was scheduled to leave the following Tuesday. I wouldn't tell anyone except the legal team and the new facility director. I had regained my memory, my dignity, and my physical safety. But I still had one final thing to do before I left town entirely. My wife's memory box, the small wooden chest hidden in the back of the closet, containing her favorite scarf, our wedding photos, and a handful of old letters. Clara hadn't asked about it. It held no financial value. It held only sentimental value, the one thing she seemed incapable of recognizing. I intended to take it with me, but as I was organizing the small list of belongings I would ship, I realized I needed to secure one last piece of evidence, not of her cruelty, but of my resilience. I called the facility director, Ms. Hayes, and asked her to hold my small digital voice recorder. "Keep it safe, please," I instructed her. "It has the recording of Clara on it, just in case." "We've copied it for the file, Mr. Davies," she assured me. "I know," I said, "but I want to keep the original, because sometimes—" I paused, looking towards the empty hallway. "I need to remind myself what the cost of my freedom was." I hung up the phone. I looked at the sunny room. I had survived the attempt to erase me. I had played the recording. The justice was served. But as I began packing the small precious box of my wife's memories, a new difficult question formed in my mind. What happens to a man who successfully secures his dignity but loses his family entirely in the process? I looked at the ticket for the flight to the coast. I knew I was leaving Clara behind, but I had yet to decide if I was leaving my own history and my own grief right alongside her.